Hello and welcome to Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. I'm your host for today, and I am not live. By that, I don't mean I'm unlive, as you now have to say on X. I'm here, but I'm here in fact on Tuesday, and you're here on Wednesday because I have to be busy and away this week. So it's a pre-record. So do please join in on the chat, but I cannot interact with you. Apologies for that. Should be back to normal, I believe, next week. Right, well, the news, of course, really for the last few days has been in Britain has been the fallout from the elections last Thursday. Now, I know that Jim has covered this on Perch TV as well, so I'm sure I won't be covering what Jim has. I'm going to look at a few of the details of this result. We're also going to be looking at the remarkable admission by one of the world's worst warmongers, who's constantly pushed for the United States to be busy on behalf of Israel in the Middle East. And he's now saying that America has lost the war on Iran. We knew that anyway, but it's very interesting to see it confirmed by Robert Kagan, but more on him in due course. Plus a book review of this book, Civil War UK, a book you really shouldn't read because it's rubbish, but more on that one as well later on. So for now, again, welcoming all of you, whether you're joining me straight away on Wednesday or later on. You're all very welcome indeed. Do please give us all the normal likes and shares. Right then, diving into the election. May the 7th, 2026 is the day really that British politics went tribal. In the heartlands of the Labour Party, the areas that Blair and Starmer in particularly so arrogantly portrayed, this once all-conquering party of the working class was obliterated. Now, I was a campaigner in British politics from a very young age. I can remember the times when even small council estates in Suffolk, let alone places like Sunderland and so on, you could go down a street and almost every single house had a Labour Party poster in the window, or if it had a garden, in the garden. It was a sea of red. And similarly in Tory areas, it was a sea of blue. Those were the old tribes. But they were political tribes. They weren't real tribes, not like we are getting now. And certainly all those areas which used to be a sea of Labour posters, all of them gone. Give you just one example. Reform stood, as in many places, in Kirklees Council in West Yorkshire. Kirklees is what used to be known as the heavy woolen area with lots of mills. Therefore, because it had lots of mills, the owners of the mills brought in lots of Pakistanis. So it's now quite heavily diverse. And it's not diverse at all. It's simply tribal. Some areas are Muslim, bang. Other areas are white, and they do not mix overall. It's just, you could cut it with a knife. But on Kirklees, Reform, who'd never held a seat there before, the British National Party held seats on Kirklees Council, which was a clue in advance of what was going to happen later, in fact. So we had seats, but Reform and UKIP before them never did. And they've gone overnight from having no representation at all to a position where they won 29 seats, more than any of the other parties, and the once ruling Labour Party won 0 seats. 29 for Reform from a standing start, and Labour absolutely obliterated. The Reform are the largest party on the council. They can only rule with the help of the Conservatives or the Independents, or you'll have a Green, Independent, Lib Dem, Conservative coalition against Reform. We will see. But nevertheless, a remarkable, absolutely remarkable result. In places like Sunderland, right up north there, Reform won a clean sweep. They won every seat they stood. But because only 1/3 of the seats were up for election, this has actually concealed the extent of Reform's success. Because there's council after council, especially in the north of England and in the Midlands, where they took virtually all the seats they contested, but they won't take control of the council until the next election, the local elections next year. But again, it's a given. It's going to happen. Quite remarkable results. It's payback, finally, for Labour's obsession with importing and chasing immigrant voters. And just the native Brits have had enough of it. But the irony is this same election saw the immigrant bloc vote, which the Labour Party thought they were theirs forever, they could take for granted, is decimated, devastated by the Greens and Muslim independents. Now, it really depends on what kind of area it is. If it's just thoroughly multicultural with left-wing white students and African voters and Afro-Caribbean voters and Muslim voters, those areas have mainly turned green against the Labour Party. But in the areas which were solidly just Muslim or white, those areas have turned to the Muslim independents. And although these elections were supposed to be about who empty the bins and so on, who controls, who does things at the local council level, it's nothing of the sort. In the English, and for that matter, white, Scottish and Welsh areas, this was a tribal vote by the indigenous for our country back. They're not going to get it through the ballot box, but they're not going to get it at all. But that was what the vote was about. We want our country back. We are a tribe. This was the political manifestation of the flag protests of the last few months, the Raise the Colours operation. This is ours, bang. And similarly, in the Muslim areas, they voted not about who was going to empty the bins. In fact, in Birmingham at present, no one collects the bins at all. The vote was purely about Gaza. It was about their tribe against the leaders of the West and against Israel. So really quite stunning stuff. And it's this parallel success of the reform on one side and Greens on the other, which leaves no political space in which the Labour Party can manoeuvre. So however long Keir Starmer hangs on as the leader of the British government, and whoever replaces him, there's really nothing they can do because to improve the fortunes of the Labour Party. Because if they move to the left in order to try to shut out the Greens, then they get even more anger against them from the indigenous Brits, and they lose even more votes and even more seats. On the other hand, if they tack right and start talking tough on immigration in order to try to block Reform and Nigel Farage, they lose even more of their white middle class voters to the Greens. So they are in a real bind. Now, several things follow on from this. A lot of people were saying in the past, people on our sort of wavelength, and speaking as a nationalist and a real traditionalist, people were saying before the election, oh, Farage, Reform, they're a busted flush really, because Reform taking on board all those old Tories, those failed Tory crooks, ex-ministers and so on, that's done immense damage. It was a terrible mistake. It's done immense damage with the white working class, the ex-Labour voters. Well, we've just seen it hasn't. Now, I did think there might be some truth in that, and frankly, I'm surprised that it hasn't worked at all. But Farage is a better politician than me. He's a better politician than anyone Britain has seen for probably 70 years or so. He is the consummate politician, and that's not wholly praise, I can tell you that. But he knew that although there's a few thousand people who are so full of hate against immigration and immigrants and Muslims and so on, that a party standing a single Muslim candidate immediately loses their vote. Against the few thousand who feel like that, there's several million, in fact millions and millions of Brits who have what the establishment would call racist feelings, but who don't want to think they're racist, because they're not really, they just want their country back. So Farage's stunt of standing and heavily advertising about 30 token ethnics out of several thousand candidates, well, not only did it not bother these people, it actively made them feel I can vote Reform and I'm still not a racist. So it was a very smart move. Well, that's it really. Reform did better than their critics and their knockers to the right as well as the left were expecting them to do. So what about Rupert Lowe's Restore? Well, their vote actually was quite remarkable. They didn't stand as Restore, as I'm sure you know. They stood just in Great Yarmouth, which is a parliamentary constituency. If you're an American, that's one of the ones that whoever wins there goes to Westminster. In these local elections, it was for the county council, and the Great Yarmouth parliamentary constituency has 10 county council seats. And Great Yarmouth First, Rupert Lowe's party, local party, stood in them all, and they won all 10, 100% record, with enormous votes. They could have halved their vote, literally, they could have halved their vote and they would still have won those seats. It was actually swamping. I've heard from a former BNP councillor, actually very active chap, who went up there for a day and campaigned. And he said that never seen anything like it, never experienced anything like it. Knocking doors, interesting report that Great Yarmouth Restore were actually knocking doors, fair play, knocking doors, and I didn't get a single hostile negative response all day. Probably no one for any party in modern British history, I'm talking the last 30, 40 years, could have said that truthfully. But it's now true in Great Yarmouth for Rupert Lowe's local party. Even more staggering in a way is the fact, well, just one thing, Great Yarmouth, it's not a run-down inner city deprived area. It's got a couple of quite rough wards. It's a little bit like Blackpool, but it's also got large swathes around it of nice middle-class suburbs and places where people with a bit of money from Norwich and so on, and even London, retire, and good, solid, lower middle-class white van man areas. It really is. It's Middle England, sort of concertinaed down into one constituency, and it had this swamping vote. Perhaps the most remarkable thing of all, I will show you this image. Here's the graph showing Great Yarmouth election results. So there on the dark blue on the left, that's the reform vote, sorry, the restore vote, 46%. But look at what's next to it, a reform vote of 19.5. The Tories next at 12.2, the Labour Party at 9%. The Labour Party has sometimes taken Great Yarmouth as a seat. But you put restore and reform, put those votes together, and you get a whisker off 66%. 2/3 of the entire electorate who bothered to vote, voting for a party which they believe is firmly against immigration. That is not true, definitely in the case of reform, but nevertheless, that's what the people voting for them thought. That is an enormous tribal vote by the white English for their country back. There's no other possible way to read it. Right then, so let's just get rid of that graph. Go away. Why won't it go away? That's rather glitchy, isn't it? Ah, that's it, it's gone now. Good. So sorry about that slight quirk of StreamYard. Let me carry on. With votes like that, people who complain that, oh, the British just won't wake up, they're so stupid, they're talking nonsense. The British public are now wide awake to the problem. It's the parties who exploit their awareness who are actually still either weak or actually asleep as to the reality of what's coming, namely something so ghastly that this is not something you can vote your way out of. But that's where we are. What it sums up is that Britain, like the entire West, is entering a time when tribal loyalties become the basis of political organisation. And Britain is heading for balkanisation. That's it. There's not even restores, much talks about remigration project. Even if they got to power, it couldn't possibly happen this side of massive civil unrest and de facto balkanisation. That is what is coming next to Britain and the whole West, especially because, as I've said before, there's very powerful forces pushing us that way. Right then, let me move on to the United States of America. I know we've got quite a few viewers over on the other side of the pond, and the comments from Robert Kagan. Now let's have a look at Mr. Kagan, shall we? Where's he gone? I believe here he is. Yes, Robert Kagan with his wife, Victoria Nuland, who was the American Secretary of State who was wandering around Maidan Square in Kiev, handing out cookies to literal neo-Nazi thugs while they had their CIA-sponsored coup against the democratically elected government of Ukraine because it didn't want to join the European Union. And the charming Victoria there, she's the one who famously said, when told, well, this will cause problems for the EU, or the EU might not agree, she said, fuck the EU. And that is what these people, these neocon gangsters running large parts of the United States foreign policy, have been doing for some years. Anyway, there is Robert Kagan, and he's co-founder of the Project for the New American Century. That makes him basically the leading neocon figure he's the in-house philosopher of every American, so-called American war for the last 30 years. And he's just published a piece in the Atlantic magazine, which is also very much a warmongering American deep state operation, and heavily Zionist. And his piece he published in The Atlantic was called Checkmate in Iran. And he writes that the United States has suffered, quote, a total defeat in a conflict, a setback so decisive that the strategic loss could neither be repaired nor ignored. And he says, briefly, he says, this isn't about like another Vietnam. It's not another Afghanistan. Those, he said, didn't do lasting damage to America's overall position in the world. This time, he says, this disaster that Netanyahu has helped drag Trump into in Iran is of an entirely different character. It can neither be repaired nor ignored, he says. He says that Iran isn't going to give the Straits of Hormuz back, not this year, or unless we negotiate harder. It will not, full stop. As he says, Iran will now be able not only to demand tolls for passage, but to limit transit to those nations with which it has good relations. Let me just find for you the Atlantic headline. Let's get rid of Mr. Kagan. And here he was. So here's the, this is his X post, actually. Oh, it's the Atlantic's X post about this article. The US is effectively checkmated in Iran, and this defeat will carry lasting consequences, unlike any America has endured before, Robert Kagan argues. And bear in mind, this isn't some Democrat who hates Trump and hates American involvement overseas. He was precisely for this sort of adventure. The think tank which he set up and ran is one of the main voices which has been pushing the United States of America towards intervening in the Middle East on behalf of Israel. So this is really an arsonist complaining the house is now full of smoke. Then he deals with other things. He says, you know, Donald Trump, rather tongue-in-cheek, had said, well, we won't bother to reopen the straits, but the Europeans can do it now easily. Mr. Kagan says this: if the United States, with its mighty navy, can't or won't open the strait, no coalition of forces with just a fraction of the Americans' capability will be able to either. So, yeah, the idea that Britain's one functioning frigate out there can make a blimey difference when the United States of America dare not send its ships close to Iranian waters, it's quite ridiculous. But Mr. Kagan goes on, echoing what myself and Jim Dowson have told you a number of times for weeks now. He said he admits that America's weapons stocks are desperately low. Kagan says this: just a few weeks of war with a second-ranked power have reduced American weapon stocks to perilously low levels with no quick remedy in sight. Goes on to say even more, that this is so bad, Mr. Kagan says, that the Gulf monarchies, the Saudis and so on, will now have to work with Iran. Quote, the United States will have proved itself a paper tiger, forcing the Gulf and other Arab states to accommodate Iran. Now, here we do then move into full-on crazy stuff, because Kagan's answer, written in the Atlantic, to this shambolic disaster is not to get the hell out of it and not do that again. No, he's proposing a massive ground invasion. He's proposing that billions more of American dollars, taxpayers' money, and hundreds of thousands of American boys and girls be sent to a ground invasion to try to do on the ground what the American Air Force and Navy have already found they cannot do. So the neocons and the Zionists are still trying to wind up this full-scale destruction. And as I've written on Substack, they're not just aiming for the destruction of Iran, they're also aiming for the destruction of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, because if they can destroy a quarter of the world's oil supply and the fertilizers and everything else that comes through it, then the oil and the liquefied natural gas and the helium and the fertilizers produced in the United States of America, including from their new Venezuelan place, that makes it all so much more valuable that it keeps the American deep state and financial power and military industrial complex going for another 20 or 30 years, which is far ahead as these materialist pigs ever actually look. So that's what he's saying, but it's crazy, not least because the Gulf states are now saying, as he pointed out, whoa, we don't really want to do this anymore. But Iran, the Iranians are very clever people. The Americans and the Zionists in Israel are relying on the Iranians to destroy the Gulf states. The Iranians might do it if they're really provoked, but overall, it's not in their interests. The nation that want to be the moral, spiritual leaders of the whole of Islam, it's not in their interests to devastate the country that Mecca's based in, for instance. So this is actually, this moment, a disaster for the people who've run and ruined the United States. But it's a moment of incredible hope for the world. Because if, in the end, with probably one more crazed, violent outburst trying to spark total destruction in the Middle East, Trump then withdraws the American forces and Israel is forced to some sort of accommodation, at least for the time being, for its neighbors, then not only is there peace for a while, it also marks the end of the dollar empire, the end of America stamping its way around the world as the world's policeman and killing God knows how many thousands of American lads, either directly in conflict or when they come home neglected and they commit suicide or they shoot up till they die. All that will be over. American hegemony will be over and we will have a multipolar world, still with clashes and frictions, but none of this crazy, we're going to go to war to dominate the world that we've seen from the neocons over the last 30 or 40 years. It's a remarkable time. We're still very close. You know, the continued effect of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. People have no idea yet how bad it's going to be. I'll come on to that if I get time later on the show. But now I want to move on to, as I promised, a review of this here book. Let me just check that I haven't got a picture. No, that's it. I'm still here, not an old picture. So, book review of Civil War UK, an oral history of the 2029 British Civil War by Anonymous. Now, this is being promoted all over the place. I don't know if any of you Americans would have seen it, but certainly it's very, very big on all the, what can you call it? All the counter-jihad network on social media in Britain. So here we go. This thing, it's advertised there on Amazon. Now, it's a blood-curdling account of a fictional civil war in Britain in 2029, but it's being happily sold in Amazon. There, it's an interesting thing. Also interesting, it's for sale as a hardback. So this isn't some little grift operated by some chancellor in Mumbai or whatever, pretending to be a nationalist. And overall, this is written by AI. One of the reasons you shouldn't read it is it's an absolute heap of steaming the usual, right? It's nonsense. It's badly written. A lot of it, you can see it's very clearly AI, but there's a lot of money behind this. It's being produced as a hard copy and it's massively promoted by, if you look at the reviews, everyone's saying it's absolutely wonderful, best thing they've ever read, terrifying, blah, blah, blah. It's a turgid piece of nonsense. Although it's based on something they're trying really hard to make into facts, and they're not that far off it. So let me tell you a little bit about the book. It's only a slim thing, 161 pages, quite large type. It didn't take AI very long to write, but what can I tell you about it? Right then. Well, first of all, it's a throwaway. We're now in 2026, and by late 2029, it will be totally out of date. It's written to make money, but more important, to wind things up right now. Now, obviously, whoever put the instructions into AI and wrote it, they know a little bit about Britain, but not very much. So it talks about how the grooming gangs, the Muslim grooming gangs, upset everybody and how it wound things up. And it mentions the number of times. But every single time it does so, it only says the word Rotherham. It doesn't ever say it was happening anywhere else. It's just as if it only happened in Rotherham. Because AI, throwing this thing out quickly, doesn't really know anything better. What are the other absurdities? Here's a classic one. Talking about Birmingham. Oh, it's terrible. They came for the synagogue first, Sarah said, crying. Burned it down while people were inside for evening prayers. Then they started going house to house in the Jewish areas. We heard what happened in York. She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what she meant. I'd seen it on Telegram, but I'd hoped it was just information. The entire Jewish quarter destroyed. Families murdered in their homes. Survivors forced to flee with nothing. Now, Birmingham doesn't have a Jewish quarter. York hasn't had a Jewish quarter since, I think it was 1290. This is Total nonsense. It's not only written by AI, which doesn't really understand Britain, but it's also put together and it's sub-edited, if at all, by someone who hasn't the faintest idea. This thing, although it's about Civil War UK, I guarantee no Brit with a brain has touched this as an editor, a sub-editor, an author, or a publisher. Because if they had done, you wouldn't have nonsense like that. It gets worse. Anyway, it's quite a ripping yarn. Farage is assassinated in the first couple of pages of the book by 3 Antifa who are also immediately shot dead by the police. So an American might have written it, an Israeli might have written it, an AI bot might have written it, but no one in Britain is going to think that the 3 Antifa who assassinate Nigel Farage are instantly shot by the police, because our police are still not armed. Apparently, according to the book, Tommy Robinson's fake suicide in prison is the last straw for many, which really kicks the English off. But the whole thing is utterly unrealistic time and time again. The English apparently kick off just once, but then they're simply slaughtered over months and they don't even attempt to fight back until very late in the book. Utterly unrealistic. I'll tell you that. If you doubt that, go and talk to people in Sunderland and see how their sort of mentality is right now. You saw it in the elections I was mentioning earlier on. But among the lack of realism, there's an Islamist army invades from France. Now, if you know anything about the France and the French and what's going to happen if that place descends into civil war, then yes, the cities are already lost. But the most radical Islamists in the world are not going to control France, because they don't control any of the territory outside the cities. And their cities will be cut off, locked in, and steadily strangled. All sorts of horrors will occur, but they're not going to conquer France such that they can spare a whole army to come and conquer Britain. It's not just the Brits don't resist, the Sikhs and the Hindus, they don't resist either. They're just slaughtered. You try slaughtering Britain's million Sikhs and see what happens to you. Just ain't going to happen. I don't recommend it for anyone. They're good people. It carries on. Page 93. I must read this bit to you, actually. So James O'Hara is the man who opens the gates of York to the Muslims. Not because he supported Islam, he was a devout Catholic. So tell me, who writes books about things like this, where it's the devout Catholics, the best of the Christians in many people's eyes, who open the doors to the Muslim terrorists? He did so because he was convinced that the Jewish community was planning to surrender York to Israeli rescue forces. You may remember the rumours that the Israelis would land an army to lift the siege. It's just utterly bizarre. It gets more bizarre. The Jews were going to betray the city anyway, is what this traitor explained afterwards. At least this way, the Christians might be spared. It's a complete inversion of the reality of the whole of Western history vis-a-vis Islam, from the gates of Toledo right through up until the present day. It's not the Catholics or the Christians who open the gates of our civilization to radical Muslims. Never has been. It's somebody else entirely. Anyway, the attack on York's Jewish quarter was systematic and thorough. Every synagogue, every Jewish-owned business, every house marked with mezuzahs or Star of David symbols. The fighters had detailed lists of addresses and names. I tell you, there wouldn't be very many, because there's not even a functioning synagogue in New York, because there basically aren't any Jews there. But anyway, according to this nonsense, the elimination of York's Jewish population was completed within 4 hours. Approximately 3,000 people, from elderly Holocaust survivors, they'd have to be very elderly now, to newborn babies. Some of our fighters were enthusiastic in their methods, says one of the Muslims. Bodies were left in the streets as examples. The medieval well, oh, there's so many tropes here, in the center of the Jewish quarter was filled with corpses. That's Deir Yassin. That's what happened to the Arabs at the start of the Nakba in Palestine in 1948. That's where the idea of bodies in wells come from. Graffiti in Arabic was painted on synagogue walls. This is the fate of all enemies of Islam. This is just pure warmongering, ultra Jewish, cranky religious mania about that they're the center of the world. And of course, in some places in the world, Jews have been massacred in slaughters. Terrible, unjust things have happened throughout history. Terrible, unjust things have happened to our people as well. But this book, it's all absolutely one-sided. It gets more and more daft in page 112. It goes into an explanation of how the medieval walls of the city of Liverpool were refortified. There was nothing in Liverpool till the Victorians built it there. It was a tiny little fishing village. But according to this nonsense, it had medieval walls. It was a medieval city. And when finally Liverpool falls to the gigantic Muslim army that's conquered the whole of Britain, millions upon millions upon millions of Brits have just done nothing. And when Liverpool finally burns, a character who's escaped watches from the nearby Isle of Man, and he sees the smoke and the flames from Liverpool. Now, take a look at a map. Actually, the Isle of Man is about 95 miles from Liverpool. You wouldn't see a thing. It gets crazier. Page 112, 113. There's an expedition. The Muslim cause is slightly weakened when they send an expedition to help the Syrian radical government fight Israel for the Golan Heights. Now, it's very, very convenient if you are either a member of MI6 or the British ruling elite who used the Islamist crazies, the cutthroats, the head cutters in Syria to overthrow the Assad government. Or it's very convenient if you're in Mossad and so on, and you know that your government also used those head cutters and provided air cover and provided hospital treatment for huge numbers and provided weapons for those same head cutters against the Syrian Assad government. The idea that the Islamists now in charge in Syria would turn against their Western or their Israeli masters is total nonsense, but it's good nonsense when you're trying to convince stupid Brits of a very, very simplistic message. I could go on and on. It has the Muslim Council of Britain, Sunni, funded by Qatar, Sunni, and Iran. It's just a little bit of a mention in there, put in there to make idiots who read it and don't understand think, yeah, the Iranians, they're really bad. They're part of this as well. When in fact, the Iranians, along with the Syrian government, the Shia of Iraq, and the Russians, did more to fight Islamist extremism, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, than anybody on this planet. The book finishes with the United States standing aside as China partitions Britain. I'll tell you what this is. This is white doom porn. It's a grift, it's making money for someone, and it's counter-jihad nonsense. And the huge number of good reviews it's had are as artificial as the rest. But of course, they're rubbing salt into the open wounds, genuine wounds, that the British people have on account of mass immigration in general and the way in which our elite allowed punk Islamist gangs to run riot with our young girls and our young lads for several decades. So, do not buy this book. It is not worth the money. It's not worth your time reading it. I read it to save you the trouble. Okay, so I hope you're grateful. If you are, for heaven's sake, don't read it, but drop me a note of thanks if you like. Right then, time is rolling on quite quickly. What else do I need to tell you? I think I'll leave, just the Covd bombshell. This is worth mentioning because it is quite remarkable. This chap here is a man called Baric, or Baric. I guess his name is probably actually from the former Yugoslavia. Ralph Baric. He is now a top virologist at the University of North Carolina. And he was one of the main virologists in America who was operating gain of function. This is tinkering around with viruses to make them more effective. And he's been under pressure from several different groups, particularly the non-profit US Right to Know campaign, which has also been working with a journalistic outfit called Real Clear Investigations. And they've been suing Baric's university for the last 6 years to get access to his communications, which they've now got. And this highlights thousands of emails which spotlight his work and ties to research in Wuhan, China. And the long and the short of it is that all the conspiracy theorists about the idea that the virus was artificial, it was manipulated, it did come out of a lab, it was not just a Chinese lab, but a Chinese lab run with CIA money, it has now all come out. A senior congressional staffer who's been following the Senate and House probe of the COVID pandemic says this: the investigations have been terrible and Ralph Barich's fingerprints are everywhere. Gary Ruskin, the main researcher on this, puts it starkly, puts his finger on it. He says, Barich designed the gun. The Chinese built it and they pulled the trigger. Well, this is absolutely true. But none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the people running the United States of America who did this. It's fascinating. Barich and others connected with him proposed a year before the outbreak. They proposed direct proposal to create a novel hybrid bat virus at the Wuhan Institute of Virology by inserting into the existing bat virus what's called a furin cleavage site, which is nothing exciting. It's a way in which humans are easily infected through their lungs. And according to author Matt Ridley, who's a skeptic realist, he wrote about this, the sheer impossibility of the very place that these people said should be used to carry out this dangerous experiment, which was rejected. But then a year after this, it turns up and it actually happens in Wuhan. And Matt Ridley says this, of all the gin joints in all the world, and in all the towns in all the world, the virus walks into the city where this research is happening. The year after someone who proposed putting a furin cleavage site into coronavirus. That's quite a coincidence. Indeed, it most definitely is. So finally, former Centre for Disease Control Director, Mr. Redfield, told the investigators in this, that in the very first month of the pandemic, he was given classified material that highlighted the way that the COVID virus had a furin cleavage site. And he then promptly briefed then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Quote, I said, Mike, this is the smoking gun. This virus came from a lab. There you go. You don't get any clearer than that, do you? Quite remarkable news in a week, frankly, of remarkable news. I'm going to give you one more very quick thing before I come on to the end slate. And that is, where is it? Crisps. Have I got the crisps? I've got the crisps. Yes. I mentioned earlier on about people have no idea how bad the closure of the Straits of Hormuz is going to get. It's going to be really, really bad. It's too late now for this to be anything other than seriously, enormously damaging to the entire world. And it's getting towards catastrophic. So this is just a little sample just of what's coming. Look at these packets of crisps. At the back, now, Calbee is the most popular crisp manufacturer in Japan, making crisps for the Japanese market. And at the back row there, you see the crisp packets as they've been sold in Japan for years. They can dig up landfill sites in Japan in 1,000 years' time, and they will find millions and millions and millions of those coloured crisp packets. And they might wonder why all of a sudden in 2026, the crisp packets suddenly lose all their colour and turn black and white. Do you know why that is? Because the ink that they were using for those crisp packets and many, many other printed things in Japan can no longer be made. It's not there because it comes from petrochemicals imported by Japan from the Middle East, and they're not getting them anymore. So obviously it's not exactly civilizational catastrophe for Japan not to have coloured crisp packets, but it's just an indication of what is coming down the tracks. Right then, I'm going to have to leave you there, aren't I? Because it's time to go. I'll leave you with an end slate, which I actually picked the other week, which was just after May the 1st, because it's a May Day end slate. So it's getting a little bit whiskery now, but it's a lovely end slate in any case. I'm going to show it to you. This is from Padstow, which is a fine English, well, actually it's Cornish, and it's not quite the same, port on the north coast of Cornwall. And every day on May Day, for hundreds upon hundreds of years, they've had this very strange ceremony. Now, it all goes on with the blessing of the local church. It always has, but it's something clearly which is actually so old, so strange, that it's clearly actually a pre-Christian thing, which has carried on a little bit like the Abbots Bromley horn dance that I think I showed you back last September. But if you want to get a real feel for the true depths of the English and the Anglo-Celtic soul, then you need to understand that things like this still go on in this country. And when they do, although they're rarely covered by the BBC or any of the rest of the liberals, because they're about us and our identity and us being a tribe, they've always been there, and they are now probably more popular than ever because so many of our people understand the need of us to be a tribe. So I'll leave you with a Padstow hobby horse and a reminder, if you like the show, please do share it, give us a likes and thumbs up, join Jim Dowson tomorrow on Thursday on Purge TV, and join me, Nick Griffin, Beyond the Pale here on Purge next Wednesday. Until then, God bless, and remember that all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men and women do nothing. So get out there and do something. Cheers.
Unite and unite, oh let us all unite, for summer is a-coming today, and whither we are going we all will unite in the merry morning of May. Oh, where are the young men that now here should dance, for summer is a-coming today. Well, some there are in England and some are in France, in the merry morning of May. Oh, where are the maidens that now here should sing, for summer is a-coming today. They're all out in the meadows of flower gathering, in the merry morning of May. The young men of Padstow, they might if they would, for summer is a-coming today. They might have built a ship and gilded it with gold, in the merry morning of May. Oh, where is St. George? Oh, where is he? Oh, he's down in his longboat upon the salt sea. Oh, half flies the kite, down falls the lark, oh, and Ursula Birdwood, she had an old mule, and she died in her own park, oh, with a merry ring and a joyful spring, for summer is a-coming today. Oh, happy are the little birds and merrily do they sing, in the merry morning of May. Unite and unite, oh let us all unite, for summer is a-coming today, and whither we are going we